Savannah, Georgia, where every street tells a story and some refuse to be buried. Under moss-draped oaks and behind iron gates lies a southern mansion with a secret. One built on power, deception, and the cries of two women who never got to share their sides of the story. I'm your host, Jamie, and this is Ghosts on Tour. And tonight we step into the Sorrel-Weed House, one of America's most haunted homes, where betrayal didn't end in heartbreak. It ended in whispers that still echo through the halls. The Sorrel-Weed House was built in the 1840s for Francis Sorrel. He was a wealthy shipping merchant and a man who, by all accounts, had basically everything. Money, status, and what it looked like is a picture-perfect family. I mean, at least on paper. But behind the curtains of their grand parlor was a different story. After Francis's first wife died from the yellow fever in 1827, Francis remarried her younger sister. I believe she was 23 years old at the time, and her name was Matilda Moxley. He remarried only 2 years after his first wife died. So, I mean, what a way to start a lovely marriage, right? I think you can kind of picture what is going to happen here just by that alone. Sorry, not to be judgmental, but marrying your late wife's younger sister only 2 years after she died from yellow fever is a little bit crazy to me. And it doesn't really make you look very good, Francis. Francis and Matilda hosted some of the most prestigious parties that Savannah, Georgia has ever seen. But this is where the story gets definitely a little bit sick and twisted, if you ask me. The story goes Francis started an affair with a girl named Molly. She was actually one of his slaves, so some people will call it an affair, and I was actually a little bit disappointed by seeing how many people called it an affair because she was one of his slaves, so I can kind of imagine that most likely was not her choice, and it probably wasn't a, love-fueled affair that you might think or you might picture when it comes to someone having an affair, right? I mean, this man, Francis, was said to have owned at least 6 slaves per year for 20 years, shipping slaves back and forth. The sad thing about this story is that I really wanted a little bit more research on Molly, but unfortunately, there is not a lot out there about her, which I think is very sad because all we know of her is basically this story, and I'm sure that there was a lot more to her than this terrible man named Francis Sorrel and his affair. But whatever the truth about this affair, whether it be an affair or involuntary, the consequences were definitely tragic. When Francis's second wife, Matilda, found out about this affair, she was so upset. She reportedly leapt from the second floor balcony to her death. And then 2 weeks later, Molly was found dead in the carriage house and she was hung by a rope. Some reports say that it was suicide, but others say that she was silenced, and I'm going to go with she was silenced for sure. But a lot of people would say that her spirit and Matilda's spirit never left the southern mansion or the Sorrel-Weed House, as a lot of people know it as. Whether it was suicide, murder, or something darker, no one could agree. But what they could agree on was that the house was never the same. Strange things started happening in the house not too long after. Some guests reported they would walk into super cold spots of the house that were so intense that their skin would get clammy. Tour guides have seen shadows that would dart from one side of the room to the other. They would turn around and nothing would be there. On the balcony where Matilda jumped from, some guests say that when they go near this balcony, they feel an overwhelming sense of sorrow and sadness. And one woman even claimed that she was pushed by invisible hands while standing near the railing of this balcony. But obviously the carriage house is where Molly's ghost seems to linger. There have been a lot of paranormal investigators that have gone to this house. They report that when they're walking through the carriage house, they can just feel an intense amount of like a fog, a grief-filled fog. Someone on Reddit wrote, I walked into the carriage house and my Fitbit heart rate monitor spiked to 180. I wasn't scared, but it felt like the room was grieving, not angry, but sad. And the staff, they won't go in there alone after dark. That is terrifying to me, actually, and also very sad to think about, because this story is obviously like so much more than just an affair and a relationship being ruined or whatever. I just feel obviously that there's so much more to this story because of who this man was, because of Francis Sorrel and who he was as a slave owner. Like I said, the Sorrel-Weed House has been visited by a lot of people. There are many tours that go through this house, and some nights are more active than others, but we do have some personal accounts that we are going to get into right now. One local tour guide shared his story. It says, I was locking up one night and heard heels clicking across the front foyer. I called out, thinking a guest was still inside, but no one answered. I followed the sound all the way to the grand staircase. No one. The air went freezing cold, and then the chandelier above me started to sway. Another person said, I stood in the second floor bedroom taking a photo. When I checked my phone later, there was a second face next to mine, half transparent, eyes sunken. It wasn't there when I took it. I deleted the picture that night. I just could not look at it. Perhaps one of the most chilling, a woman who visited during a group tour said that she felt a hand wrap around her wrist in the dark. She thought it was her husband until she turned and realized that he was 10 feet away. She never went back, which, tis, because neither would I, girl. Today, the Sorrel-Weed House still stands in the heart of Savannah. By daylight, it's a preserved historic home. Lots of tourists stroll through the halls. They take a look at how beautiful the house is, but obviously the story that comes with it is not beautiful, in my opinion. But by night, it is said to be something entirely different. It just completely turns into a very paranormal fueled location, I guess. There have even been ghost hunting films that have been shot there. I've watched a couple on YouTube, actually. There was one specifically that was done by BuzzFeed, and it's a very interesting one. There have been a lot of skeptics that have left there completely shaken, and just their mind has been totally changed about it being a hoax, that, you know, there's ghosts in there. And some visitors say that they've left with more than photos. Their memories that are burned into the back of their head. One ghost tour guide said, this house doesn't just tell its story, it shares it, whether you want to hear it or not. But beyond its haunted lore, the Sorrel-Weed House has been featured in some pop culture moments, more specifically in the opening scene of the movie Forrest Gump, which I know everyone is familiar with. If you haven't heard of that movie, then where have you been? The opening scene of the feather that is floating in the sky is actually filmed on the rooftop of the Sorrel-Weed House. Today, the mansion operates as a historical museum. During the day, it is offering daytime historic tours, and during the night, there are a lot of ghost tours that go on in the Sorrel-Weed House. I actually went to Savannah for my birthday a couple months ago, and my boyfriend purchased a true crime tour that we went on, and unfortunately, there were so many tours going on that night, and of course, I fear that we got the worst tour guide. And I'm so sorry to say that, because he was a very nice gentleman. Don't get me wrong, very nice. But he was a lot more focused on the history of Savannah rather than like the ghost stories and the crime stories. And I'm not a history buff unless it has to do with ghostish or true crime. I'm more interested in that kind of stuff. I'm not really interested in, I don't even know what he was saying, to be honest, because I didn't understand a lot of it. But I guess I'm into dark history is what I would say, which is a little bit morbid to say. Obviously, I'm not like, ooh, I love that happened. No, I just think it's interesting. It just tickles a part of my brain and just is like very interesting to think about. We visited a bunch of these different places, different haunted places in Savannah. I mean, we walked like 5 miles and we passed a bunch of these places, and I'm pretty sure the Sorrel-Weed House was one of them. And if I'm not mistaken, there is like a statue, I think, in the vents. I don't know, maybe it's not that. I'm trying to think of the specific story that he was telling us at this time, but I know that there was a story, and we were right by the house, and there was a vent, and when you would look down, you could see a woman and a man, and it was like a little statue underground, and it was because one of them had jumped from the balcony to their death. And I feel like that sounds very similar to this, but I feel like it was the man that jumped and not the woman in this story. So let me know if you are a Savannah, Georgia resident, or if you know more about that than I do. Please leave a comment, because I cannot remember that for the life of me, and I can't seem to find it online either. The Sorrel-Weed House is more than just a monument to antebellum elegance. It's a house haunted by choices of love, betrayal, and silence. 2 women died here, and their voices, however faint, still rise through the dark. If you ever find yourself walking through Madison Square after the sunset, just look up at the Sorrel-Weed House, and you might just see Matilda in the window. But if she sees you back, you might want to keep walking. I'm your host, Jamie Nelson, and this has been Ghosts on Tour. Next time, we're heading to the snowy peaks of the Canadian Rockies, to a luxury castle turned hotel where a bride never made it to her first dance. The ghost bride of the Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta, Canada. And until then, travel light, but leave room for a ghost or two. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Ghosts on Tour. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought about that specific story. If you enjoyed, press the subscribe button, leave a like, and maybe share with a friend that likes a ghost story or two. Okay, guys, I hope you guys have the best day ever. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, then YouTube says that you might like this one. Okay, love you. Bye.